Imagine this. A worm is in your tooth. Small, white, insatiable. It writhes, gnawing at a nerve. This worm, everyone believed for thousands of years, was the cause of your excruciating pain. So you are seated in a chair. The barber surgeon shoves a metal funnel into your mouth, its narrow end aimed directly at the ailing tooth. Beneath the wide opening, a bowl of glowing coals awaits. A pinch of henbane seeds is tossed onto the embers. Foul, acrid smoke billows up the tube, straight into your mouth, directly into the tooth. You cough, you choke, tears stream from your eyes. Then the barber surgeon removes the funnel and holds up a saucer of water. And you see them, tiny, black, wriggling specks. There they are, coming out, he triumphantly shouts. Everyone believes. Everyone sees the worms. No one knows they are merely charred embryos from the seeds. This was the only way, to smoke out the parasite or to yank the tooth out with pliers, along with the cursed worm. A world where pain was a living entity and treatment a brutal ritual. And this ritual was public, a show, a spectacle in the market square. A platform would be erected. Nearby, a crier would beat a drum to drown out the screams. And then he would emerge. The tooth puller. Not a doctor, no. A traveling entertainer in a colorful doublet, adorned with necklaces of extracted teeth. His trophies, his advertisement. He would call the sufferer onto the stage, seat them in a chair, or sometimes just on the ground. He'd brace a knee against their chest to keep the poor soul from flailing. Then he'd reach into their mouth, not with a scalpel nor a delicate instrument, but with crude iron pliers better suited for pulling nails from a horseshoe, or with a pelican, a horrific iron contraption resembling a bird of prey's beak, designed to clamp onto a tooth from the side and wrench it out with monstrous force. A crunch, a scream, lost in the drum's roar. The tooth puller would straighten up, holding the bloody fragment high above his head in the pliers, displaying it to the crowd. Applause. As for the person in the chair, they were lucky if they only lost a tooth. More often their jaw was broken. Bone fragments remained in the gum. Infection would set in. Pus. Fever. A week later they would be buried. No one treated teeth. They only removed them. And anyone did it. The blacksmith, the barber, the executioner. They had strength in their hands. And they had pliers. No one knew why a tooth blackened and crumbled to dust. No one understood what decay was. It was God's punishment, a devilish affliction, or that very worm. Toothache was a death sentence, and the choice was simple: suffer from the worm or from the tooth puller's iron. There was no third option, but a third option was given. In 1678, in Brittany, a boy was born, Pierre Fauchard. His father was not a count, nor a baron. He was a simple cloth merchant. The boy had no future in Parisian salons. His destiny was the sea. At 15, he joined the Royal Navy, and there, in the cramped, stifling belly of a warship, he witnessed hell in miniature. The same hell as in the market squares, but without the drums and colorful doublets. Here, everything was real. Salty wind, the creak of masts, and the stench. A sickly, sweet, nauseating smell of scurvy. He watched battle-hardened sailors, who feared neither cannonballs nor storms, weep at night. He saw how they couldn't eat hard biscuits, how their gums turned into bloody pulp. Teeth rotted, wiggled, fell out right into their palms. The ship's surgeon, a certain Alexandre Poteleret, tried to help them. He didn't just pull everything out. He cleaned something, scraped something, tried to treat gum ulcers. He did it clumsily, almost by guesswork, but he tried. He didn't see the tooth as a cursed fragment to be ripped out with flesh. He saw it as part of a living person. And young Pierre watched. He absorbed. He saw suffering not as a spectacle for the crowd, but as a quiet personal tragedy of his comrades. And something clicked in his head. This horror, this helplessness before a rotting bone in the mouth, it wasn't divine punishment, not a worm. It was a challenge. He didn't see a curse. He saw a disease, and every disease must have a cure. The Navy remained astern. Along with it, scurvy, the creak of rigging, and haphazard surgery. In 1705, Pierre Fauchard disembarked. Forever. He was 27. He had no diploma from a Parisian university. He had no wealthy patron. He had only what he had seen on the ship, and one insane idea. A tooth could be saved. He opened a practice in Angers, not in the market square, without drums or necklaces of trophies, in a quiet room where people came not for a show, but out of desperation. And at first, they asked for one thing, what they were used to. Pull it out. And so a girl was brought to him, barely 16. Her father, a stern shopkeeper, pushed her forward. She cried, burying her face in her hands. The problem was a front incisor. Almost in the center was a small but ugly black spot, the devil's mark. The pain came at night, sharp as a needle. The father was grim. Pull it, he told Fauchard, before it rots completely and infects the neighboring ones. It was an order. It was the common sense of the time. Remove the infection. Amputate. Fauchard looked at the girl, at her tear-streaked eyes, at how she would look without a front tooth, an ugly hole instead of a smile, for life. He shook his head. No. The shopkeeper looked at him as if he were mad. What do you mean, no? Are you a tooth puller or what? I won't pull it out. I will treat it. Silence hung in the room. Treat it? How could one treat a dead, rotting bone? It was like treating a severed finger. The father wanted to turn and leave for a real master, one with strength in his hands and good pliers. But his daughter looked at Fauchard with desperate hope, and he began. He seated her in a chair, asked her to open her mouth, and took out his instruments. But these were not pelicans, not the crude pliers of a blacksmith. He laid out on clean velvet what no one here had ever seen. Thin steel rods curved at the ends, tiny spoons, the size of a pinhead, files, more like needles, a jeweler's tools, a watchmaker's, but not a butcher's. He took one of his drills, the thinnest one, and brought it to the tooth. The girl gripped the armrests, her knuckles white. She expected excruciating pain, a crunch, a scream, but instead, a scraping sound, quiet, unpleasant, vibrating. Fauchard didn't press, didn't break. He scraped. Carefully, millimeter by millimeter, he began to clean out the blackness, the dust, what they called the worm's work. Speck by speck, he removed the diseased tissue, leaving only healthy, hard bone. It wasn't like an extraction. It was like the work of a sculptor, removing everything superfluous. Then he took a sheet of tin, thin as paper, cut it into tiny strips, and began to do the unthinkable. He plugged the hole. With dense, tight pellets of metal, he filled the void he had just cleaned out. He packed it down, again and again, and then he took a burnisher and polished it. He worked for an hour, maybe 2. When he finished, he handed the girl a small mirror. She cautiously brought it to her face, looked, and couldn't believe it. The black spot was gone. The tooth was in place, whole. Instead of an ugly hole, a tiny silver dot, almost imperceptible. She touched it with her tongue. It was smooth, and it didn't hurt. The pain was gone. Her father stood behind her, peering into the mirror over her shoulder. He was silent. He didn't understand what had just happened. It didn't look like treatment. It looked like sorcery. He slowly pulled out his purse and paid Fauchard twice what any tooth puller would have asked for an extraction. He didn't thank him. He just looked at this strange young man with his jeweler's tools, and left, leading his daughter, who still couldn't stop smiling at her reflection. That day, Pierre Fauchard didn't just save a tooth. He killed the worm, not the one in the dentin, but the one in people's minds. He proved that a healer's hand could not only destroy, it could create. And the rumor spread, first in whispers, from one neighbor to another, then louder, from Angers to Tours, from Tours to Nantes. Word spread about a strange healer who didn't pull teeth but repaired them. People traveled for weeks to see him. They didn't believe it, but they hoped. They came to his office, sat in the chair, and waited for a miracle. But there was no miracle. What was his trick? Sorcery? A deal with the devil? No. His secret was ridiculously simple. He did what no one had done before him. He stopped listening to fairy tales about worms and started to look, just to look with his eyes. He saw neither divine punishment nor the devil's machinations in the black hole in the tooth. He saw the same thing he had seen on the ship. Rot. Ordinary, material rot. Like wood rotting in the hold. Like rust eating at an anchor. He saw blackened bone, soft as damp earth, and he saw healthy tissue around it, hard as stone. and he asked himself a question. Simple, like a hammer blow. A question that, for some reason, no one had asked for thousands of years. What if you just removed all the bad, cleaned it out, scraped it out, to the last crumb, and left only the good, only what was still alive? It wasn't magic. It was a carpenter's logic. If you see rot in a board, cut it out. Otherwise, the whole board will rot. It was a sailor's logic. If you see a hole in the hull, patch it. Otherwise, the ship will sink. And so he did. He didn't exorcise the worm. He cut out the decay. And then, the second step. A hole. An emptiness. It's weak. Dirt and food particles will get in again, and the rot will start anew. So it must be closed, sealed, patched, with tin, with lead, and for the wealthier, with gold. Step 1, remove the rot. Step 2, close the hole. That's it. That was his entire secret. He didn't invent anything new. He simply applied common sense where superstitious dread had reigned for centuries. He transformed a divine curse into a common malfunction, and himself from a worm charmer to a mechanic of human smiles. But this mechanic did not work in a vacuum. His quiet room in Angers was part of a large, noisy world, and in this world there were laws, kings, and an inquisition. Word of him reached Paris, and there it was heard by men in powdered wigs and strict black robes. Men who held neither pliers nor jewelers' files. They held parchment, diplomas, licenses. This was the College of Surgeons, and they did not like the story of the smile mechanic at all. What does treat mean? They asked each other in their dusty offices. What does fill mean? It's not in the books. Teeth are not treated. They are pulled. So taught the great Guy de Chauliac. So it has always been. Pierre Fauchard was a nobody to them, an upstart, a provincial without a diploma from the University of Paris. He had not passed exams in Latin. He had not defended a dissertation on the 4 bodily humors. He simply worked. And his work was a slap in the face to their entire scholarly world. It proved that their thick folios were lies, and their methods were barbarism. And they struck, not with pliers. They struck with words, with paper, with law. Charlatan, they hissed, a provincial trickster. He deceives people. His tin patches will fall out in a week, and worse rot will begin underneath. He mutilates the king's subjects. He practices without permission. Letters flew to Angers, to city officials, to the magistracy. The demands were simple. Investigate, forbid, expel. Who was he? Where was his diploma? Who gave him the right to drill the teeth of respectable citizens? Behind the surgeons, the university professors raised their heads. Gray-haired men who had spent their lives reading Galen and Avicenna. They had never seen a living patient, but they knew exactly how to treat one. By the books. And in the books, there was no mention of fillings. There was the tooth worm, and there was the only correct method, extraction. The ancients did not have this, they said, shaking their heads. Therefore, it is heresy. Fauchard found himself alone, against everyone. He had no guild to protect him, no professor to intercede for him. He had only his hands, his instruments, and his patience. Officials came to his office. They did not look at the saved teeth. They did not listen to grateful people. They looked at papers and demanded one, the most important one, a license, a diploma, proof that he had the right to do what he was doing, and he didn't have it. He was cornered. On one side, a queue of sufferers ready to worship him. On the other, a deaf wall of parchment, Latin, and contempt. And this wall was slowly closing in, threatening to crush him and his life's work. He could run, hide, return to Angers and quietly fix his neighbor's teeth, hoping the metropolitan inquisitors would forget about him. He could try to buy a diploma, offer a bribe, find a patron. But he did what no one expected of him. He sat down at a table, picked up a quill, and started a war, not with iron, with ink. If they struck him with parchment, he would answer them with a book. If they hid their knowledge behind university walls, he would bring his own, to the market square, for everyone. He would tell everything, to every barber, every healer, every blacksmith who had enough sense and steady hands. He would give them his secrets, for free, 5 years. 5 years he sat at his desk, The scratch of the quill on paper was the only music in his house. He was not writing a philosophical treatise. He was not arguing with Galen. He was writing an instruction manual, the most detailed instruction manual for saving teeth the world had ever seen. He drew everything himself, his instruments, every hook, every file, every drill. He showed how to hold them, at what angle to approach the tooth, with what force to press. He described everything, how to make a tin filling, how to straighten a crooked tooth with gold wire, how to make an ivory denture and secure it to neighboring teeth so that a person could smile again, how to treat gums, how to clean canals. Everything he had learned in 20 years of practice, all his mistakes, all his victories. He held nothing back. He turned his mind inside out and laid its contents on paper. In 1728 the book was published, 2 volumes, 800 pages, 42 engravings. On the cover it simply read, Le chirurgien dentiste, the surgeon dentist. He didn't just write a book. He named his profession. He separated himself and others like him from the itinerant tooth pullers with their drums and pliers, not to pull, but to treat, not to mutilate, but to save. The book landed in the scholarly world of Paris like a cannonball. At first there was laughter. A book from a charlatan? A guide to deceiving simpletons? The surgeons of the college picked it up with a disdainful smirk. Then they opened it, and the laughter caught in their throats. They saw the diagrams. They read the descriptions, and they understood. This was not deception. This was not sorcery. This was a craft. Precise, understandable, logical. Anyone with hands and a head could take this book, order instruments based on the diagrams, and do the same thing. The book did not argue with them. It ignored them. It did not ask for their permission. It wrote a textbook for them. It did not prove them wrong. It simply showed how to do it right. And the wall collapsed, not from a battering ram. It simply crumbled to dust because it became unnecessary. What was the point of a diploma that taught barbarism, when here was a book that taught salvation? What was the point of secret guild knowledge if anyone could buy it and learn everything? Pierre Fauchard did not receive a diploma. He became the diploma. His book became law. A New Testament for all who wanted to treat teeth. It was translated into German, into English. It was studied in London and Berlin. The provincial upstart, whom they wanted to expel from the profession, became its founding father. He did not break through the wall. He simply built a door, and opened it for everyone, and they entered. Through that open door, the blacksmith's son, tired of forging horseshoes, the watchmaker, whose fingers were accustomed to delicate work, the barber, who was tired of being a butcher. They took his book, carried it to their workshops, and began to look. Before they saw only one thing, a rotten tooth, and one tool, pliers. Now they saw 42 engravings, dozens of instruments, hundreds of techniques. The book lay on the workbench. Beside it, a piece of steel, and a hammer, and they forged. Not pelicans. They forged thin hooks, tiny spoons, needle files, exact copies from his diagrams, and the world began to change. Not immediately, quietly, in one city, then in another. The sound of the market square changed. Before, the roar of the drum and screams hung over it. Now, in a quiet room around the corner, a faint scraping sound could be heard. Before him, the question was one: pull it or suffer. After him, the question became another: a tin filling or a gold one. Before him, toothache was a curse, a hole in the tooth, the devil's mark. Treatment, a bloody performance. After him, pain became a symptom, a hole, a malfunction, a breach in the hull that needed to be repaired. And treatment, meticulous work, a repair. He didn't just teach them to drill and fill. He changed the very essence of things. He took what was considered dead, rotting refuse in the human body and said, "This can be fixed." He looked at what caused superstitious dread and saw in it only a mechanical problem. And that was more terrifying than any heresy, because it worked. People no longer went to the square as if to the gallows. They went to the office as if to a workshop. They sat in the chair and did not pray. They simply waited for the master to finish his work, and they left, not with a bloody hole in their mouth and a broken jaw, but with a small, shiny dot on a tooth, saved, alive. He gave people back what nature had taken from them and what tooth pullers had stolen. He gave them back the right to smile. So what was his main secret? The weapon with which he killed the monster that had lived in people's minds for thousands of years. Not the steel of his instruments, not the ink of his book. It was all ridiculously simple. He had what each of us has: eyes. He simply dared to look, without fear, without tales of devilish corruption and cursed worms. He looked at the black hole in the bone and saw a black hole in the bone, and nothing more, just a malfunction that needed to be fixed. Sometimes, to defeat an ancient dragon, you don't need a sword. You just need to light a candle and see that it's only a shadow on the wall.